YouTube, my name is Shadow Bunny and welcome back to another reaction. Today, we're going to be reacting to 5 strangest last words from death row inmates by top 5 unknowns. Now, I haven't reacted to a top 5 unknowns in a while, because I haven't made, I guess top 5 unknowns is the only scary channel I like to react to because theirs are like authentic and I love how they creepify their videos, and I don't really know what to expect. I'm guessing it's going to be last words. This is a 15-minute video, so it's going to be a little longer video than what I normally do. Anyway, always in the description below. Go subscribe to Top 5 Unknowns. Go get your blankets. Go get a snack. Go get a drink. Go get your movie pants on. Go get your whatever, and sit back, relax, and let's be creeped out. And without further ado, let's react. The classic Top 5 Unknowns intro.
Criminals who've committed unforgivable crimes in some states are sentenced to the death penalty. This sentence differs greatly from a life sentence. Death row inmates have no chance of parole and must undergo one of many procedures to end their life. Sometimes an inmate will only spend a few months awaiting their fate, while others have to suffer through years of waiting before they're punished. Death row inmates are often allowed to share their last words before they're executed, and here are 5 eerie occurrences of that.
What did I say 1 and then it went to 5? That was weird.
Number 5. Aileen Wuornos
Said 1 again.
is one of the most notorious female serial killers in America. The interesting thing about Aileen is that her backstory has led many members of the public to believe that she was innocent, or at least that she didn't deserve the fate that she was handed. Aileen came from a broken family. Her father was a criminal with a past of assault and abuse. He eventually took his own life while in prison, and Aileen never met him. Her mother abandoned all of her children and sent them to live with their grandparents. Some psychologists say that these events made Aileen insecure and emotionally traumatized. By age 11, she began engaging in sexual activities at school in exchange for money, food, cigarettes, and drugs. At 18, Aileen was arrested for driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and unlawful use of a firearm, and later she was charged with failure to appear in court. From here, her
Never want to not appear in court. That's the worst thing you can do.
Criminal record began to snowball out of control, and eventually, if Aileen wasn't in jail or court, she was selling her body and robbing men to get by. From 1989 to 1990, Aileen came in contact with 6 men that hired her as a prostitute. All 6 of these men were eventually found dead in either their cars or wooded areas near a highway. All of the victims had been shot several times at point-blank range with a small caliber handgun. As the string of eerily similar murders went on over the course of at least a year, an abundance of evidence was collected that would later convict Aileen. Law enforcement concluded that the crimes were the work of a serial killer. In 1992, Aileen was arrested and tried for the murder of Richard Mallory. She claimed that he tried to rape her and she acted in self-defense. Mallory did have a history of such crimes, and during the trial, a team of psychiatrists diagnosed Aileen with borderline personality disorder. She was still deemed competent to stand trial and received her sentence 4 days later. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. There was a response from media and the public which defended her actions as self-defense. When the other 5 cases were brought up, many changed their minds though. After a series of trials concerning the other victims, she was eventually charged with 6 death sentences. After this, Aileen spent several years
6 death sentences, oh my days.
In various female prisons. She also began exhibiting symptoms of paranoia. She claimed that prison guards were poisoning her food, and she boycotted showers and food for extended periods of time. In the final months of her life, she had interviews with news outlets, journalists, and even TV producers. In many of them, she spoke erratically about her innocence, her religion, and a conspiracy she concocted about the whole world being against her. On October 9, 2002, Aileen was set to be executed early in the morning. Her last words may not seem scary. In fact, they may seem downright confusing. However, that makes her statement all the more chilling. They're the final words of a deeply troubled and demented woman who spiraled down the wrong path. Aileen's final words were, "Yes, I'd just like to say that I'm sailing with the Rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back.
Whoa.
Number 4. In 1995, James Jackson married his wife Sharon and became a stepfather to her 2 teen daughters, Sunny and Erica. For 2 years, the new family lived a normal, happy life together, or at least that's what outsiders would assume. On April 9, 1997, Sharon's coworkers became concerned that she didn't show up for work or call out sick. It was very unlike her, and a coworker contacted Sharon's sister, who picked up their mother and went to Sharon's apartment. The pair arrived and, after failed attempts to knock on the door, entered the residence. Once inside, they found an unimaginable scene that forever traumatized them. The 2 teen girls were deceased on the living room floor. Sharon was found also deceased in her bedroom. The sister and mother immediately called 911 and officials reported to the scene. Instantly, they were able to determine that all 3 victims had been choked. A letter from James Jackson was left behind which confessed to the crimes. A nationwide manhunt followed, and James was found within days. When interrogated, he wasted no time with lies or excuses. He blatantly admitted to the crimes with a blank and emotionless expression. James confessed and shared the disturbing details, and according to his confession, James and Sharon had been found frequently fighting for the last several months, leading up to the tragedy. James was concerned and furious at Sharon's threats to file for divorce, and in the midst of an angry outburst, James asked one of the girls what she thought about a possible split. She replied that she didn't care either way and would be content with their decision. Because of this response, James choked the girl, and later, when the other sister arrived home, James did the same to her. Sharon eventually returned from work, and James shifted his goals by trying to reconcile with Sharon. However, his attempts failed, and Sharon saw the bodies of her children. Her reaction was obviously very emotional, which triggered James back into a state of rage, so he choked the mother as well. James was charged and sentenced to death, and he was executed via lethal injection on February 7, 2007. Almost 10 years after his crimes. His last words perfectly represent the demeanor that James maintained over the years, both in court and in media interviews. James always seemed unbothered and almost sarcastic. His final words were, "See you all on the other side. Warden, murder me. I'm ready to roll. Time to get this party started." Number 3. Known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, Peter Kürten was a German serial killer active from February to November of 1929. When arrested, Peter claimed that his first murder took place in 1899. He claimed that he picked up an 18-year-old girl and convinced her to travel with him. He allegedly had intercourse with the young woman and then strangled her. Officers were unable to find any documentation confirming his story, but found nothing reporting a teen dying in that area either. They concluded that if his statement was true, the girl likely survived the attack. And as for his other crimes, the first documented murder occurred amidst a robbery he was committing in 1913. He stumbled across a 9-year-old girl asleep in her bed. He strangled and cut her before committing a sexual act over her body. He allegedly returned to the area the next day to witness the reactions of the public when she was found. A few months later, Peter again stumbled across a 17-year-old girl while committing a robbery. He strangled the girl and followed up with a routine heinous act. He managed to escape the scene of both crimes and roam free. Peter was arrested and sentenced to 6 years imprisonment after being caught for crimes such as burglary and arson. After his release in 1929, the pace of his crimes increased significantly. In 1929, Peter stalked, assaulted, and killed an elderly woman, assaulted and killed a 9-year-old girl, and murdered a 45-year-old male mechanic. Although the 3 victims varied in age and gender, the conditions of each crime were exactly the same, being pleased to label the crimes as the work of a serial killer. From March to July of 1929, he attempted to strangle at least 4 other women. These victims survived and were the last attempts by Peter until August 11, 1929, when he killed a young woman named Maria. After that, Peter anonymously submitted a letter to police in which he described the crime in detail and offered a crudely drawn map to where to find her remains. Officers initially thought the letter was a hoax sent in by a prankster. However, upon following the map, Maria's remains were uncovered. This further raised the stakes of finding this unnamed serial killer, and in the following months, Peter embarked on an all-out spree, which he committed several more crimes. Finally, in May of 1930, he was arrested. Without hesitation, he confessed to 68 crimes. At least 10 of those were murder, 31 were attempted murder, and the rest were smaller occurrences like robbery. A short 22-day trial proceeded, and many disturbing facts about Peter were uncovered. Among these facts was that Peter claimed he was a vampire and would often consume the blood of his victims. Although Peter continued to share outrageous claims that would suggest he was insane, an exam determined that he was competent to stand trial. He was found guilty of all of his crimes and sentenced to death. On July 2, 1931, Peter was scheduled to be executed via guillotine, an old method that was common in executions. His last words were not only eerie, but directly referenced his strange beliefs in vampirism and his obsession with blood. Before his head was placed on the guillotine, he turned to the psychiatrist and said, "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be a pleasure to
What?
end all pleasures." Number 2. Carl Panzram has a full resume of crimes that he was found guilty for. The title given to this man on most websites is American Serial Killer, Arsonist, Robber, and Burglar. In 1907, he was 15 years old. Carl was convicted of larceny and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Carl later recalled after his release that any goodness left in him was smashed out, and his crimes accurately reflected that. From 1910 to 1920, he embarked on a crime spree where he committed countless acts of robbery, assault, arson, and more. He was sporadically imprisoned, but only for short periods of time. In one case, he helped an inmate escape from prison. And finally free again in 1920, Carl switched gears and graduated to much more serious crimes. He attacked and murdered several people all over the course of 8 years. He was finally arrested again in 1928 for robbery. During interrogation, Carl randomly confessed to all of his crimes, which included the murder of 3 young boys. One in Salem, Massachusetts, one in Connecticut, and one in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia victim was confirmed to have been a 14-year-old newsboy. Carl was sent to trial where he was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison. While in prison though, he attacked a guard and was then given the death penalty. Before his execution, Carl wrote a letter which offered a detailed confession of his crimes. In the letter, he included the statement, "In my lifetime, I've murdered 21 human beings. I've committed thousands of burglaries, robberies, larcenies, arsons, and last but not least, I've committed sodomy on more than 1,000 male human beings. For all these things, I'm not in the least bit sorry." Many officers, guards, and inmates that got to know Carl during his stay described him as an empty man with no emotion, who felt no remorse. This statement clearly confirmed those claims, and while they aren't technically the last words of Carl, they do paint an accurate picture of the sociopath's mindset. On September 5th, 1930, Carl was executed via hanging. When the executioner placed the black hood on his head, Carl allegedly tried to spit on it. When asked if he had any last words, he said, "Yes, hurry it up. I could kill a dozen men while you're screwing around." Number 1. Robert Alton Harris was an American car thief, burglar, kidnapper, and murderer, active in the late 1970s. His execution is notable because it was the first in California since 1967. At a young age of 13 years old, Robert began to build his criminal resume. He participated in robbery, car theft, assault, and even kidnapping. He served sporadic sentences related to these smaller crimes over the years, but was never behind bars for longer than 3 years at a time. Upon each release, Robert would immediately slide back into a life of crime, usually accompanied by his younger brother, Daniel. In July of 1978, Robert asked his brother to help him rob a bank. The next day, Daniel stole 2 guns from a neighbor's house, and the pair spent the next few days purchasing ammunition and practicing the robbery. On July 5th, the Harris brothers accidentally stumbled upon 16-year-olds John Mayeski and Michael Bayer. The teens were sitting in a truck in a parking lot of a supermarket eating burgers. Robert held the boys at gunpoint and forced them to drive him to a nearby lake. Daniel followed close behind in another vehicle. Robert informed the boys that their truck would be used in a bank robbery. Once the group arrived at the lake, Robert commanded them to get out and kneel beside the water. The boys obeyed, and once on the ground began to cry and pray. Robert allegedly yelled at them, "Quit crying and die like men." He proceeded to shoot both boys several times. The Harris brothers then drove back to Robert's home and finished the victim's half-eaten burgers, while gloating about the crime. In the following years, several trials took place to determine Robert's fate. He was given the death penalty, but various lawyers and court circuits disputed this and aimed to give Robert a second chance or at least a less severe punishment. Finally, Robert was scheduled to be executed via gas chamber on April 21st, 1992. He was strapped into the gas chamber and given the chance to share his last words. It's difficult to determine the tone of his statement, but what he said was interpreted as a sad realization of his crimes or as a sarcastic, macabre joke to the audience. Robert's last words were, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everybody dances with the Grim Reaper."
Whoa. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Anyway, that's gonna be it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Sorry I wasn't really talking. I was just trying to figure out what I was just watching. This was really creepy. It was really weird. It was a really good video. Anyway, originally in the description below, go subscribe to Top 5 Unknowns. And yeah, I love Top 5 Unknowns. I haven't reacted to them in a while. I'm gonna start reacting to them some more. Anyway, thank you. Shut up. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, Discord, Reddit. I have an email now. It should be up on screen right now. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Hit that post notification bell so you know every time I upload. And subscribe to, thank you everyone so much for watching. I love you guys. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!